I'm Brigadier General Robert Titus, U.S. Air Force retired. I did 27 years active duty in the Air Force. Yeah, like any other kid, I built airplane models and used to sail them. I made them balsa and paper and shellac them and wind them up with a rubber band and a propeller and sail them out the window, and sometimes set them afire first just to see what happened. Watch them go down in flames and build another one. My first ride in an airplane was in a Wacko, open cockpit biplane. Rode in the back seat on my father's lap, and that was quite an experience. And ultimately, an Air Force recruiter told me that I could be an aviation cadet, and I asked what the deal was, and they explained that if I passed through the pilot training program, they'd give me wings and a commission, and if I didn't, they didn't want me. So I said, well, that's a no-brainer. You're going to teach me to fly, and I can leave if I want to? Okay, sign me up. Anyway, I got through pilot training, and I ended up at Tyndall, and went in the, Hal Shook was the base ops officer. And he said to me, what do you want to fly, Lieutenant? And I pointed out the window at a Mustang. I'd like to fly that. I said, well, get a parachute. Got airborne, and he said, give me 80 miles an hour and do me a barrel roll to the left. And I did that, and then do it one to the right. Now give me 120 miles an hour and show me a loop. He said, okay, let's go in and shoot a couple of touch and goes. We did that. He said, well, okay, let's say a full stop. So I did that. So I said, okay. We went over and sat under the wing of a Mustang, and he told me war stories for a while and said, well, you ready to fly it? And I said, sure. He told me to get up and fly it around for a while and try some overhead patterns. And I did that at altitude. The first time I did, I lost about 3,000 feet. This is dangerous. And finally I had enough of all that and came in and 1,000 feet above the ground, pitched out at the end of the runway and did the 360 and found out that was no problem at all because I had good depth perception with the ground close. And so I shot a couple overhead patterns, a couple of touch and goes, and that was my checkout. And from that point on, I've been a fighter pilot. We lost a lot of guys in Korea, and I fully didn't expect to survive it. I met a friend of mine that I went to high school and college with on R&R in Tokyo, and I started telling him what he should tell my mother. And he said, what are you telling me? I said, well, the probability of my being able to complete this tour is somewhere between zip and zilch. Well, aren't you upset about that? I said, no, that's what we do for a living. If we lose, we lose. I remember one time, we were strafing a ridge, and he said, there's another bunker at the top of the ridge. And I looked up and saw it and put my pipper on it and squeezed off some ammo, and I said, holy mackerel. I pulled with all I had and closed my eyes. It was all over. I was sure I was going to crash into that ridge. And nothing happened. I opened my eyes, and I was there, still flying. And I came back, and as I shut the engine down, the crew chief was looking under the airplane like this. I thought, what's the matter? I wonder. And there was a tree limb in the intake. So I guess it was close. Oh, God, how dumb were we then? We were operating off a dirt strip at K-46. It's just a gravel and dirt strip along a riverbed about 3,000 feet long. And then we had to take off single ship because of all the gravel. You know, you whip up the gravel and beat the next airplane up. So single ship and join up. Well, I was very frustrated because being a green bean, you know, I didn't have jet time. And I'd been a flight commander and an assistant ops officer, and I had about 1,000 hours of Mustang time almost by then. And I've been flying them at Tyndall and Luke before I went over, and Johnson Air Base in Japan. And I was pretty comfortable with the Mustang. I mean, I thought it was a great machine, and I thought that I knew how to fly it. You know, it wasn't that hard an airplane to fly. But you couldn't get in a jet unless you'd flown one. I remember the group commander over at Johnson saying to me, he said, we need pilots for the F-94 squadron. One guy said, I'd like to fly 94. You got any jet time? Yes, sir, I got about 15 hours. Oh, good, you can go. Another guy, he's got 6 hours. Well, he can go. I said, I'd like to fly him too. Colonel, you got any jet time, Titus? No, sir. Well, couldn't use you. I said, you telling me, sir, that it's harder to fly one of those airplanes than it is a Mustang? Well, he says, you have to understand, it's an entirely different concept. I said, oh, okay. Can't fly one until you've flown one. And then when we ran out of Mustangs, they gave us F-86s, which was the hottest airplane we had at the time. If you can't fly this in 10 hours, and so, you know, your fourth or fifth ride, you're flying combat. You're saying, I guess I can fly it. I mean, on my first ride in the Mustang, I came back and landed, I said, they've been lying to me. This is a kiddie car. This is the simplest airplane I've ever been in. You can't hurt yourself in a Mustang. I didn't think. On the other hand, I see guys spin in them and say, how did you do that? And there were people that were afraid to fly the airplane, I guess. I remember at Edwards one time, we had a two-seater F-86, and I had to get some nighttime. Anderson said, go get your nighttime and take so-and-so with you, the cargo pilot. So he gets in the back seat, and off we go. We fly out to Daggett. It's kind of boring. We come back into the restricted area. I started doing rolls and things. He said, you're not allowed to do acrobatics at night. I said, sure you are. Look at this. And he was upset about that. He comes back and he says, I'll never fly with you again. I said, you got that right. Yeah, the F-100 zero launch. That was a 130,000-pound solid rocket propellant, which was strapped onto the bottom of the airplane.
An F-100 Super Sabre is being prepared for a 130,000-pound kick in the pants. The Zell system provides takeoff capability for our combat-ready fighters in much the same manner as a Matador missile is launched.
The technique was you're sitting on the back of this truck, elevated 45 degrees, 30 degrees, whatever it was. You run the engine up, check out your instruments, and bang it in the afterburner and pull the trigger, and you get an additional 130,000 pounds of thrust. And that burns out in 4 seconds, and now you're doing 275 miles an hour. So I had the opportunity to demonstrate that at Indian Springs outside of Nellis. I remember Hoover was on the ladder with me, and I said, watch this, Bob, I'm going to roll as soon as the rocket burns. He said, oh, no, you don't want to do that. You got a full combat load, you can't do that. And I said, get off the ladder and take it with you. Anyway, I said, somebody said, why did you do that? I said, well, you don't often get a chance to shine your rind in front of a crowd. I had designed that flight plan, and Charlie Blair was out at Edwards for some purpose, and I invited him over to the house for dinner and threw my maps on the floor and said, I've got these two F-100Fs with dead reckoning navigational equipment in them, and I thought maybe I'd do a polar flight. There's a strange element that creeps into the equation when guys allow panic to dictate their behavior. I never understood it myself, but I've seen it a lot. Shut up and die like a man.
Target from 11 o'clock, Diet. 11 o'clock. Ryan has bogeys at 7 o'clock low. Pace, get ready for change. Lead will be rolling in about 15 seconds. You got it over here at 11 o'clock? No, sir, I can't see it. Okay. Bogey 3 o'clock low.
And we're coming down Thud Ridge, and I see a MiG, and I said, I'm gone. We followed him around and locked onto him. He's going downhill, and Zimmer, my back seater, is saying, fire, fire. In the meantime, my wingman's yelling, break. And I said, no, we haven't got time to guide that missile. I laid it up on its side, full aft stick, full bottom rudder, let go. I'm passing everybody, nothing but F4s back there. I see another MiG. I go after him. We're all locked up on him, but he's going down, and he's got too much clutter to pick him up with a Sidewinder. So we launch an AIM-7, got an expanding steering circle, everything's okay, but the missile doesn't even appear. And so then I fire another missile, disappeared. I fire a third AIM-7, and this guy's in a turn down here, and it hit his hit his wing right at the wing root, and he punched out. And then we're going, holy shit, he's got a Martin Baker seat just like everybody else. Duty is ours. The results are God's. We talk about honor. Honor is something that we can't get for ourselves. Honor is that which is accorded to us by our fellows, our comrades. We can only act honorably by remembering that what we do is a measure of our character. Country, service to country is what it's all about. We raised our hand, each of us, and said we would. We will. And so we did, regardless of the outcome.
My name is Christina Olds, and I'm the daughter of Brigadier General Robin Olds, who passed away in 2007 and who was good friends with Bob Titus for many, many years. So in January, he got the diagnosis that he'd live about 6 months, and that's what it turned out to be. So at that time, I started gathering people together and getting the word out about his illness, and started receiving this unbelievable flood of messages from around the world and people and friends. And so Earthquake was part of the core inner circle that was made up of Vern Lundquist, Fred Garrison, J.B. Stone, who would come visit in that house. And it was a wonderful thing for me to see my dad light up when Earthquake was there, and just the laughter. That's all those guys did together, was laugh. I don't think I ever heard them being serious. If you're given a chance to have a great conversation, why be serious when there's so much laughter to be had? So they were just very, very dear together. Bob came up quite a few times, about 5 times, which was a lot, and he was one of the very few people that Daddy would let visit, because he was tired. It took a lot of energy to talk. In fact, he was always exhausted when people left, but Bob Titus was one of the few people he would allow up there. And so when Bob came up, they didn't talk about old times at all. They just would sit around and laugh. They would talk about what was going on now and who's doing what, and so it was never any sort of sweet, compassionate kind of, oh, you're sick, and my dad would say, no, yes, I'm very sick. None of that. So there was tremendous laughter, and that was really, really great. I know that was very healing for my dad at that time, to have a friend up there that he knew so well he could totally relax with. And Bob was one of out of all the people that tried to get in there to see Robin, he was one of the few that I would let come in, because I was sort of the gatekeeper. There would have been hundreds that tried to come through to see him. And Bob Titus was a very, very dear addition to the very sweet and tender process of my dad's last months. Earthquake was one of the people that I invited to give a eulogy at my dad's funeral in June 14th of 2007 at the Air Force Academy. And he gave just an absolutely brilliant, brilliant, beautiful speech. Had people in tears. I mean, the tears flowed from the start of that ceremony to the end, right at the cemetery, when the 4 ship of the F-4s flew over and number 1 pulled up into the sun. And then Earthquake was very present at the party afterwards too, and was quite the center of people sort of glomming onto him, being around him, because his presence really reminded a lot of people of Robin. I always felt like, in a way, he was my second dad in many ways, because he was a big, warm presence that reminded me so much of my father. And it was very comforting to be around him.
My name is James Dwayne Fletcher. Went to the United States Air Force Academy from the class of 1985, graduating. I met General Titus in the fall of 1983, and I met him, believe it or not, at the Air Force Academy clinic, cadet clinic. I'd taken my roommate in for an issue, and General Titus is sitting here, and at the time he had a full beard and mustache. And I did not know he was a general. My father's a retired Navy enlisted man, and I spoke to General Titus, and this little airman stuck her head around the corner and said, "General, your medicine will be ready in a minute." Of course, at that time, my heart jumped up in my throat, and I couldn't say anything else. About 2 weeks later, we were at the Air Force Army game at West Point, and General Titus came walking up to the field and introduced himself and said, "Dwayne, I'd like you to come over to my house." And he adopted me as his first cadet that he had had since class of 1978, which Casey Scow, the former Thunderbird, who, God rest his soul, has passed away, and he invited me into his family. I got to stay there for the next 2 years until I graduated. I thought that Mrs. Titus was definitely his better half. She complimented him in all the ways that he needed to be complimented. She was just a wonderful, true, genuine Southern lady. She was a flight attendant with Delta when they met and married. And she raised 4 children, and she raised all the cadets that came in. And she had a sense of calmness about her that balanced out the massive energy that pours off of General Titus. If there was one person who could keep him focused and on track, it would be Margie. General Titus was very instrumental in getting me to go to flight school. So I went to flight training in Columbus, Mississippi. I graduated in 86-08. I flew T-38s as an instructor pilot for 8 years. Then I went to the heavy world and flew C-141s for 12 years up at McChord and down at March Air Force Base in Southern California. I then transitioned to the C-17 and flew the C-17 for 7 years. I got off of active duty in 1996 and got hired by United Airlines, and I've been flying the 737, 757, 767, and 777. And all of that is due to General Titus's mentoring and making me want to fly. But General Titus has very much so taught me the value of perseverance, and if you do go into something, you continue it until it goes to its natural course. As I stayed in 28 years and retired as a lieutenant colonel, I flew into Afghanistan in January of this year. I always wanted to do what we trained to do, and that's something that he instilled in me, is that if you're training to do something, you should do it as best you can. His sense of duty, obviously, is phenomenal with as many years as he served towards the country. That's why I stayed in the reserves for 17 and a half years and finished up at 28, not counting the Air Force Academy. So, with my young enlisted people that we would have, you try to lead by example, which is exactly what General Titus taught. I would always, if I were going to have them do something, I would gladly do that first. I would also take care of my troops so that if they needed to be fed, they got fed first. If they needed a place to sleep, you didn't take the first room, you always bought the first round, which is the fighter pilot thing of taking care of the people in your squadron, taking care of the people that take care of you. Because if you take care of them, they will take care of you. And General Titus is always talking about that's your duty to your people, that if you are leading them, you need to take care of them. Well, the impact on my life was huge. I told General Titus he was like my second father. He mentored me and taught me the things I needed to do to be an Air Force officer. He helped me look forward to challenging myself on a daily basis, and I do. You listen to the story when he takes off the back of a truck with a JATO bottle on an F-100 in Germany. You listen when he landed gear up as a 2-2 squadron, when they took him back out of flight test and let him go into operationally in 62 in the F-105. He landed gear up and he just threw the helmet at the guy and said, "You can have your airplane back." So he, you face adversity, you do things. He jumped out of a P-51 and broke his ankle. But he continued on. He had golden hands. He went to flight test, and I mean, that's phenomenal. What's even more phenomenal is they let him out of flight test and back into the operational fighter community. That takes something to do. And the F-15 and the F-22 wouldn't be around without him. Not in the way we know about it, because he was the SPO on the F-15. You have to pick your battles, and sometimes you win the battle but lose the war. And that's exactly what happens. Well, General Titus meant a lot to me growing up. He, like I said, was my surrogate father. My home away from home was his house. He taught me about the Air Force and about how you make it and make your decisions. It was his input that made me make the choices that I made in my life. I love him. I've always loved him. I've told him that. He is just he was a driving force in my Air Force career, and he's a driving force in my life today. I try to treat my children and teach my children so that they'll grow up and be like he, and hopefully I will be someday.